So August 21st, 2022, first year of the field being reclaimed by us. It was ended in soybeans with a harvest in November or December of last year. It's been in the 80s about the last 2 weeks, 90 and 100 before that for about a month. It was a little bit longer of a summer than we usually seem to get here. We've had minimal rain in this area. Most of the storms have been going a little bit to the south or west of us. I have been doing some bush hogging in here now, and I'm starting to spreading some ryegrass, a little bit of wheat seed. Mostly been coming in and just hand throwing it before I bush hog down any really weedy areas. Been doing the broadcast spreader where I can, and actually just ordered a leaf blower mounted spreader. As you can see in the areas that have been getting mowed, stem density is still very low. There's a fair amount of bindweed, less morning glory than I expected, but there is some. And out of the stuff that I planted, chicory's doing quite well. And tons and tons of butterflies, good amount of bees. The radishes and turnips are still kicking around. Clover, you can see there's a crimson clover there that is still blooming. So it's actually bloomed all summer long. The grain feed area I'll do in a separate video, but there it is. It looks like most of it is coming to maturity. My tree cluster areas have been fairly successful from what I've seen. This is cluster 1, so we've got a cowpea here, huckleberry, and you can see a lot of huckleberries on there, zinnia. The only tree that's still doing anything in there that I see anyways is this Chinese chestnut. The pecan looks like it's died all the way, as well as everything else. The sage and rosemary are doing pretty good. And there is a cherry tomato in there just as a little test plant to see if I could grow anything out in the field without it getting eaten. Buckwheat has started to self-seed from the spring planting. I did hand broadcasting in, I believe, January and February while we were still getting some frost to kind of heave it in. Pretty good growth all the way around. A lot more dense and tall vegetation than I was expecting. There's a fair amount of this Johnson grass coming through. Yeah. It is what it is at this point. It's getting me biomass. We're not grazing anything on it, so really at this point it's if I can get something on there, I'm happy, unless it's a really noxious weed. You see clover's still doing pretty well here. A lot of poplars coming up. There's a few sweet gums and sycamores coming up as well. I've been leaving them where I can. This is going to be the firewood alley along this back driveway. So it's going to have the fall planting of locust trees here. The poplar, I'll probably go ahead and keep some of that as actual firewood as well for our shoulder seasons when we don't need a ton of heat, but want something to burn. There are a lot of ground cherries coming up. They've been maturing for a little while. You can sort of see through here. Really good coverage, not a lot of stem density. The ground is still quite hard in areas, as I found from moving the electric netting into this area. This little floodplain spot is doing pretty well. You can see the weeping willow here. She's doing well, and there's elderberries in here, as well as some other willow cuttings, kind of overgrown currently, but a lot of birds out in the field this year, tons. We got pigeons, golden finch like crazy. Mostly they're going for the sunflowers. So we'll see how seed goes. I feel like I'm mostly just feeding birds at this point. You said a lot of butterflies, good bee activity. I actually don't see a whole lot of our honeybees. We've got one hive that's doing really strong and one that is doing okay. That probably won't make it through the winter. But they all seem to pretty much head back for the woods when they're going. You can see a little bit of fleabane back in. This low ground cover has cooked now. A lot of this amaranth. And it's starting to mature. The field peas or field beans, field peas are doing pretty well. There's areas where they're pretty dense. You can see here's a ground cherry patch that is very dense. They pretty much are done bringing me wood chips, it seems. The power folks have moved out of our area. Should have enough to last me a little while at this point. Now this berm, when I made it, was about 3 feet tall, just out of wood chips. Mostly as a windbreak and garbage catch, and it's doing pretty well. It's broken down, it's compacted a lot. I also came in and put in these beans along the south edge of it, and they are crawling right up the pile, doing their thing. Now the trees that I planted back in December throughout these rows here, these were just ones that I dug up out of random areas, brought some from work. It was primarily pine trees. It's not doing too hot. Here's one over here. It got really overgrown and I kind of lost them. I should have marked them, so I've lost them to some extent. A lot of them didn't make it through the year anyways, without them getting watered, and it was dry, a lot of wind burn. I was actually having some of the trees pull right up out of the holes. When it got windy, they would start spinning and just corkscrew right up out of the hole. I believe this is a foxtail. There's been a little bit of that around. Just whatever grass this is, up in the southern part of the field, up on the flat, it has done really well. You can see it's quite dense. It's starting to lose a little bit of its color, so I'm not sure if it's gonna make it through the winter or not. This was Eric's Christmas tree that I planted. It's actually made it, surprisingly. Now the view blocker mix along the road has actually done quite well, as it was a little bit stunted by the lack of rain early on. Then when we finally got a good rain, it definitely picked up a good bit. You can see it's not as dense as I would like, not as tall as I would like, especially down on that edge. It's a little bit low, but it's come up to about probably 5 to 6 feet on average. It's doing its thing. It is definitely reducing the view. Makes the field look a little bit more like just a crop field. A lot of grains on it. This is a sorghum and Sudan grass mix. And you can see there's all sorts of goodies there. So the birds have been really happy with that. Now my honey locust trees here, these are thornless honey locusts. They've been doing well. Decent new growth all along. So far, out of the 100 planted along the road here, all 100 are still alive. This one is actually one of the thorned, I'd imagine black locust. There were a few in the mix, but you can see they've got some pretty serious thorns. It's gotten fairly overgrown up here twice, really. I just bush hogged it again recently and took the brush cutter through and cut all the locust trees out the last time. You can see there's a sycamore popping up. I'll go ahead and leave those and really go for as dense of a planting up front as I can. Try and create a little bit of a natural fence there, as well as a little sound barrier from the road. There is a lot of this wood sorrel throughout, especially in these slightly lower flat spots up front. Now up on this southern part of the field, really the upper flat area, I did very little seeding at all. We did throw some clover out, and I believe that was it. That was, again, this past winter. What I was looking for there was a little nitrogen fixation, and we do intend to develop this area into pasture a little bit further down the road. Right now we're concentrating up by the house where we can. You see there's some crimson clover going there. The red clover's been blooming in areas, and the white clover has come back to blooming, although a lot of it in the yard is starting to die off. I believe mostly from just getting baked. You can see the beans up here again. Nice growth. Covering the mound pretty well. I was hoping maybe they'd add a little nitrogen, as well as just a good cover. I did experiment with putting some ginger root in the wood piles. There is one down on my sweet potato pile that's actually done something. The ones along these, I have not seen any growth yet, but thought it would make for an interesting experience. Get up on there and give you a little higher view. There you go. You can see where I bush hogged through it. It's a little bit more yellow, but really good coverage, surprisingly good coverage, honestly. Same thing on the other side of the berm here. As I said, this front portion was really left to its own devices because trying to concentrate on the areas we can use. You see a little bit of clover in there. That looks like it's probably white clover or red clover. But whatever grass this is, it's come in really well. Nice thick coverage, and it's stayed green pretty much all summer. And it's about knee high. It's really kept the weeds down for the most part. There's been some stuff growing up through it, but not nearly like the lower portion of the hill. Every now and then there's a little sorghum patch. You can see one up here and one up here. Been trying to go through and harvest heads off of them, as I really don't think they're going to self-seed just with the amount of birds we have in here this year. I don't know if we're always going to have this kind of bird activity. I'd imagine so, as long as we have grains and everything going. See, here's a little area with it looks like forage collards. There's probably some turnips and radish in there and some of the clover. And again, when we seeded it, it was just nighttime, walking around, trying to broadcast as far as possible, throwing like by hand like that. And so there's no real grid or anything to it. It was just getting some coverage. There's a little bit of this Jimson weed coming up when I see it, I do tend to try and pull it. Sprinkle a little seed there. I believe this is ironweed. It's got a white flower, which makes me unsure if that is definitely what it is. And some black-eyed Susans coming up there. Now the riding area, I had been keeping it well mowed, and then it finally got out of hand. A lot of Johnson grass in it. Kind of got out of hand after this last rain, and it's been so hot that it's been hard to get out. Tractor's broken down, you know, all that good stuff. So I finally bush hogged it last week and then rode the mower through it. Went ahead and broadcast some annual rye over the top. But it's pretty toasted. I imagine it will come back. But lots of yellow now. Been some pokeweed in areas. Not a ton. This area I bush hogged a lot of goat weed coming up in it. You can see it here. It's very toxic, so I've been trying to keep it knocked down as much as possible. And it does seem if you hit it while it's starting to flower a little bit, it has been knocking it down pretty well along the wood line there. It's actually been almost eliminated from the looks of things. I didn't even seed over that because I just cut it low a few times, and some of the other grasses have come in. I'd be happy with that. I will try and get some rye down on it, but you can see good coverage. We got potential for rain this evening, and then nothing for a week or so. So I'm kind of hoping it holds off and doesn't get my seeds germinating. This area here is where we had the meat birds, 3 roosters and a small tractor being moved around. It was pretty heavily overgrown with the goat weed, so I had knocked that back before bringing them in. See a little spreader there. It was spreading right before this video. Some of the radishes are starting to self-seed back. We're starting to get close to that fall planting season again. And this is a field pea patch. It's about 30 by 60. This is mostly an experiment to see if I could get chicken feed out of it.